Whether you are a larger company in the life sciences or technology space, or you're a solo or a small business, there are going to be times when you need to change a contract. It may be that you want to end it early, it may be that you want to extend it, or it may be that you want to make changes to some of the terms because the situation is different than it was when you first signed the contract. And that's very common when you've got sometimes longer contracts that are 2 or 3 years long. So what are the things that you need to think about and what should you be doing? First, if you are in a larger life sciences or technology corporation, hopefully you have somebody who is a contracts manager who is keeping track of the contracts for you. They should ideally have a log of all the different contracts that you're in, when they started, when they ended, and what the particular technology or purpose of that contract is covering. You should always know when the contract is starting and ending, and I often suggest creating either a spreadsheet or, if you have the manpower, an executive summary for each contract that has the key information so you always know where you are with each contract and you know what your rights are as far as either terminating, renewing, or making changes. When you're dealing with larger contracts, there's often going to be a renewal provision, there's going to be a change order provision, especially if this is a larger ticket contract. And now we're talking in the $1, $2, $5, $10 million services. Even some smaller contracts will have change order procedures. What to do when something changes, which party can suggest the changes, how you negotiate those changes. And those are the kinds of provisions that you want to have in your executive summaries for your contracts so you can quickly find the relevant information without having to sort through a 10, 20, or even 40-page document. What about if you're a solo or a small business and it's in business? You have a business situation. You're a consultant, you're a coach, some other type of small business. A lot of the same principles apply. You probably don't have the manpower to be writing executive summaries of every contract that you're in, but you certainly should be able to keep a simple spreadsheet. Whenever you enter a new contract, just put it on a spreadsheet which has the name of the contract, the purpose of the contract, who the parties are to the contract, the start date, the end date, and this is really key, how much notice somebody has to give if they want to either end or terminate the contract or renew the contract. And in fact, you might have some change procedures in there. How do you make an amendment? The reason you want to have this information, and it's just as important for you smaller businesses as it is for the bigger businesses, is you don't want to be either stuck in a contract that you meant to terminate, but you forgot to give notice on because you weren't sure when the date was because you didn't have the information available, or you have an other side terminate a contract and you're not prepared to deal with ramping up someone in place, or maybe you want to, if you're the service provider, change the services that you're providing, or more importantly and more common, change the money that you're charging for the services. Maybe the client wants to change the scope, which means you need to change what you're charging, or maybe you're using third-party components or a third-party contractor and they want to change the price on you. So you need to know what your rights are to be able to request the changes, or whether or not your contract gave you the right to make the changes unilaterally without consent. Now, even if your contract gives you the right to make changes unilaterally, my personal opinion is it's always better to get buy-in and acceptance verbally before you try to do anything in writing with the other side to your contract, the other party, because you want to keep having a friendly relationship. You don't want to all of a sudden go, my contract says I can change prices unilaterally. I'm going to raise it by 20%. And the other side goes, wait, why did my rates go up? And you get into an unpleasant situation. You always want to keep everybody informed. So what do you do? How do you make these changes? How do you end a contract? How do you amend a contract? How do you change the scope? The first thing I want to say is you always want to maintain professionalism, and you want to keep the relationship as positive as possible all the time. Because if this is somebody that you have already had a long-term relationship with or want to have a long-term relationship with, it is in everybody's best interest if all the parties are reasonable all the time. Now, granted, there are going to be some times when you just have to put your foot down, but you still can put your foot down in a professional way. And what I suggest, whether you are a big company or small, whether you're in tech or a coach or in life sciences, you want to document everything in writing. Now, most contracts that were drafted by a lawyer, and I do this in all my contracts, require all changes to be in writing because you don't want to have any confusion. And that is usually the biggest source of disputes. If people don't understand and agree with what the changes will be or what's expected under a contract, that is the fastest way to end up in a dispute or litigation over the contract. So even if the contract that you want to change or end doesn't require writing, I would make sure you do it in writing anyway, so that you can show and demonstrate, if there ever was confusion, that you gave notice, that they received the notice, and that they agreed, or at least they didn't object. Because sometimes it's just enough to say, here's the change I'm going to make, or I am terminating the contract based on this language in the contract, effective on this day. And they may not have to write back and say, I agree, but you'll be able to show that you have provided that information. Especially if you're a small business, you want to make sure that you don't end up keeping a contract around that you no longer need, or that might actually hurt you if it still exists. Because as long as a contract is there, your potential liability goes on, your obligations as far as confidential information go on. And if you forget that you have that contract, you might have obligations that you don't realize still apply to you, and you could accidentally breach the contract, which is far worse than terminating the contract. So now that we are getting towards the end of the year, and contracts don't always, but often run on a calendar year basis, or they may not have started on a calendar year, but they get adjusted to a calendar year, now is the time to take a look at the contracts that you have. One, find all the contracts that you have. No matter what type of business you have, find all the contracts you have and take a look at them and decide, are these contracts that I still want to be in? Whether you are providing the services and it's your client contract, or whether you're getting services or products from somebody else. Is this a contract that still serves your needs? So the first question is, do you want the contract at all? If the answer is, I don't need this contract at all, look for the termination provisions, the section that gives you the right to end the contract, and figure out what you need to do to end it, and then do it. If, however, you realize that you want to keep the contract, but you would like some things to change, the first thing I would suggest is check the contract, either read it or have your lawyer read it, to figure out what your rights are to change a contract. And there may be something called a change order procedure, or a change process, or an amendment process. Read and understand what those rights are, and think about the changes you want to make before you talk to the other side. You can't make them, but you should understand what your goal is. Is it that your costs have gone up and you need to pass those costs on to the other side? Or has the other side asked for totally different types of services? You're willing to provide them, but you need to change the contract to match. Once you figure out what you want, then you can approach the other side and talk to them, honestly, have a direct conversation about, does something need to change? If something needs to change, you'll want to amend the contract in writing and make sure that your changes are clear so that everybody knows what they want to do. You also may be at the point where you have a contract that's going to come up for renewal. Often when a contract is about to renew, there is the ability a certain number of days before to provide notice if you want it to end. It might be 30 days, it might be 60 days, or 90 days. A renewal period is a great time also to think about whether or not you want to change your pricing for the next year or the next term of the contract, or whether you want out. If you want out, understand what your notice is to non-renew, and there actually can be provisions that say this agreement you must give notice by 30 days before, or the agreement automatically renews. Once it's renewed, then you're trapped into your termination language, which may or may not give you an out just because you want one. Termination provisions usually are either for convenience, because you want out, or for cause, because the other side has breached a term or condition of the contract. Almost all contracts, not all, but almost all, have the right to get out if the other side breaches something and doesn't fix it. But not every contract has the right to get out just because you want to. So it's really important that you know what your rights are to get out just because, or whether you need to non-renew, or whether you're going to have to wait till somebody does something bad, or you reach the natural end of the contract. But a renewal is a good time, if you want to raise your rates, to bring that up. Whatever date it says you have to give notice by if you want to end, make sure you start having these conversations well in advance of that date, because it can take some time to have it work through. And just make sure that you take whatever action you need by whatever any drop-dead deadlines that you have in there. So I hope that this has provided you some information, whether you are a bigger tech or life sciences company or a solo or a small business, on how to handle your contracts, how to end them, how to renew them, how to amend them. This is Sharon from HTBiz Law. Follow us, please, on any of our social media. You can get lots of tips and information. We are on TikTok, we are on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. You can find us on the web at htbizlaw.com as well. Have a great day, everybody.